Number 20. Fake robbery backfires. In 2014, Australian YouTubers Danielle Marin, Robert Malazzo, and George Prostus thought it would be a good idea to stage a fake robbery. Their target was an ATM in Sydney. The group of friends filmed themselves pretending to rob each other, with one of the men posing as a thief while his friend pretended to use an ATM at a shopping centre. The two then started to wrestle on the floor, attracting the attention of a witness passing by who quickly rushed over to help. The witness punched one of the men in the face and actually broke his nose. The footage first popped up on the YouTube channel Reckless Youth about a decade ago. It resurfaced again in 2023 after it was discovered by Barstool Sports. During the chaos of the fake encounter, one of the friends could be heard on the video yelling that it was just a prank, but it was already too late for the injured man, whose nose was spewing a river of blood. One of the YouTubers said later on that the group performed the prank as a social experiment to see if people would step in to stop a robbery, but the video got a lot more negative feedback than they were expecting, with many viewers saying that the concept was dumb. Others took satisfaction in seeing one of the men get his nose broken for their stupid stunt. All things considered, the outcome of the situation could have been way worse. In February 2021, another YouTuber named Timothy Wilkes and his friend pranked a small group of strangers in Nashville, Tennessee, by pretending to rob them. The prank was made even worse considering the men confronted the strangers at knife point. With the camera rolling, the pair walked up to the targets outside of an indoor trampoline park with butcher knives in their hands. This was a terrible idea for so many obvious reasons, and it wasn't necessarily surprising when a member of the group shot Wilkes with a gun. The 20-year-old died from his injuries, and the man who fired the weapon, 23-year-old David Starnes Jr., clarified that he was not in on the prank and had no idea the robbery was set up. Starnes was not charged for the shooting, which was deemed completely justified under the state's self-defense laws. YouTube banned dangerous and harmful pranks 2 years before the death of Wilkes. Fake robberies were specifically included on the list of things that would result in a video being removed from the streaming site. And tragedies like this are a reminder that the policy exists for good reason. Number 19. Sydney Morn. 22-year-old Jonathan Gilbert, or Tyler Lane, got caught up in a so-called lover's quarrel back in 2023 after getting close with a woman named Kaylee Morgan. Gilbert's ex-boyfriend, 18-year-old Sydney Morn, allegedly grew jealous of Gilbert's new connection. While visiting a family friend in Spalding County, Georgia in July of that year, a trio of suspects egged the house Gilbert and Morgan were staying in. Authorities later identified the pranksters as Sydney, 18-year-old Jeremy Munson, and 19-year-old Mackenzie Davenport. Gilbert went outside to face off with the vandals, who quickly ran back to their car. He chased after them and was shot multiple times by one of the people inside the vehicle as he approached the car. Morgan told news station later in an interview that Gilbert collapsed and was begging for his life. Someone then stole a necklace holding the ashes of the young man's deceased father, and the suspects left the scene. Officers got there and found Gilbert dead in the middle of the street. Morn, Munson, and Davenport are all facing multiple charges, including malice murder, battery, and criminal trespass. According to police, Sydney was the one who fired the gunshots, while Jeremy ripped Gilbert's necklace straight off his neck. The pair are facing additional charges of aggravated assault and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony on top of the others. Number 18. TickTock pranksters picks the wrong victim. A TikTok creator named Jay, who goes by the username JKindaFunny8, is well known for his elaborate pranks, which often involve sneaking up behind strangers with a megaphone and shouting the word Monano. According to one source, this word means morning eater, while others say that it's not even a real word. In early 2022, Jay quietly approached a large man from behind and tried to carry out one of these pranks, but it didn't exactly go as planned. Before he knew it, the target had the content creator on the floor in a headlock before he could even get a word out. Jay could be heard on video insisting it was a prank, and thankfully nothing too serious seems to have come of the situation. The footage went viral, receiving divided reactions on whether or not the stranger overreacted, or if he gave Jay a well-deserved taste of his own medicine. Number 17. Deadly Ding Dong Ditch. A game of ding-dong ditch proved fatal for a Florida teen back in 2003 after knocking on the wrong man's door. In what initially seemed like a harmless prank, Mark Drews and his friends spent their Friday night knocking on a couple of neighbors' doors on Boca Raton and then mischievously running away. One homeowner, 40-year-old J. Stephen Levin, mistook the 6'2" teenager as a burglar and answered the door with a gun in his hand. He shot at Drews, who collapsed while running away and died later on that night at a hospital. Levin told police officers that it looked like Drews had something in his hand when he knocked and that he reacted out of the belief that it was a weapon. The tragedy left community members and Floridians divided on whether or not Levin acted within his rights under the state's Stand Your Ground law. Friends, family members, and other supporters of Drews' family wanted to see charges against Levin and were angry when the investigation dragged on longer than they thought it should have without any arrests. It was later revealed that Drews was shot in the back, showing that he wasn't posing a threat to Levin at the time of the shooting. Prosecutors ultimately decided to move forward with a manslaughter charge against Levin, who pleaded guilty in exchange for a 10-year probation sentence. He also agreed to complete 1,250 hours of community service. For the first year of his probation, Levin went to jail every Saturday and Sunday from 8:00 a.m. to 4 p.m. He decided to contribute $2.50 per week toward a scholarship fund in Drews' honor and was required to sincerely and publicly take responsibility for his actions. The Drews family was extremely upset when Levin tried to put an end to his probation early in 2009, after serving just 5 years. Speaking with the Palm Beach Post, Mark Drews said that Levin expressed remorse to the family in court and then seemed to take it back completely during a civil trial just 3 years later, saying that he never meant a word of his original apology. Prosecutors claimed that the Drews specifically agreed with the clause in Levin's plea agreement about being able to end his probation early if he satisfied every clause. But Mark Drews claimed he was unaware of the stipulation until Levin actually put in the application to end his supervision. Much to the family's dismay, a judge granted the early termination, and Levin was free. Number 16. The Great Blue Hill Eruption. An April Fool's prank that took place in Milton, Massachusetts worked a bit too well when it caused hundreds of people to panic about a possible volcanic eruption in the area. It all started with a fake news broadcast by local station WNAC-TV, which claimed that the nearby Great Blue Hill had started spewing lava and flames. Standing at around 635 feet tall, the Great Blue Hill is located 10 miles outside Boston, near the towns of Milton, Randolph, and Canton. It's the tallest point in all of Norfolk County. The prank report said that the erupting hill was spraying ash onto nearby homes and properties. In reality, the Great Blue Hill isn't even volcanic. Created by Boston TV news producer Homer Silly, the report contained fake warnings from then-President Jimmy Carter and then-Governor Edward King, made from spliced clips of a past speech. It included images of the eruption of Mount St. Helens, which had happened just a few days earlier. Reporter Jan Harrison said that the Blue Hill disaster was caused by a chain of geological reactions resulting from the Mount St. Helens eruption in Washington state. At the end of the broadcast, Harrison held up a small sign that said April Fools. But by then, many local residents had already gone into panic mode and had stopped watching the TV, not noticing the sign. People began to flee their homes while dozens of calls flooded into local police stations and the Massachusetts Department of Civil Defense. After realizing the report was a prank, dozens of angry civilians called WNAC. The station apologized later that night during its 11 p.m. late-night news broadcast. Homer Silly was fired the next day for failing to exercise good news judgment and for violating the Federal Communications Commission's policy against showing shocking footage without informing the audience beforehand. Number 15. Timmy Hill. In the summer of 2014, after a late-night swim, two teenage boys thought it would be funny to throw their soaking wet underwear onto a West Virginia state trooper's parked cruiser. 18-year-old Timmy Hill was there with the other two young men that night, but didn't participate in the underwear prank. The commotion from the boys laughing awoke Trooper B.D. Gillespie's wife, who in turn notified her husband of the situation. Determined to catch and punish the pranksters, Gillespie quickly put on his uniform, called his work to report that he was going on duty and went driving around in search of the mischievous trio. He eventually managed to track the teens down nearby and got into a scuffle with Hill, who was allegedly being uncooperative outside the young man's house in Mercer County. Gillespie pepper-sprayed Hill during the fight, hit him in the head with a service baton, and shot him twice, killing him right there at the scene. A grand jury declined to press charges against Gillespie after determining that he acted reasonably with deadly force, even though Hill was unarmed at the time of the fatal encounter. It was later revealed that Gillespie and Hill had a long, troubled history, which started over Gillespie's disapproval of Hill riding his four-wheeler around their quiet neighborhood. According to a lawsuit filed by Hill's family, Gillespie frequently watched the teen using binoculars and a radar gun. The trooper also allegedly filmed Hill at one point with a camcorder. In the lawsuit, the Hill family accused Gillespie of making multiple unwarranted house calls, warning them to keep Timmy's behavior in check, and that he had the law on his side if anything were to happen. The allegations are enough to make you wonder if Gillespie had it out for Hill. All legal matters around the tragedy have since been settled, but questions regarding the events leading up to the shooting continue to linger. Unfortunately, nobody will know the exact details of what went down that fateful night. Number 14. Narrick Galley. In September 2013, during a deadly encounter that's been described by investigators as unintended and extremely tragic, 18-year-old Pramila Lal was killed by a family friend at a house in Longmont, Colorado. Lal and her family had recently moved out of the home where the crime took place and were having 21-year-old Narrick Galley watch the property for them. Galley was playing some video games with Pramila's younger brother one night when they started hearing movement within the home. As far as the two young men knew, they were the only ones in the house, or at least the only people who were supposed to be there. Afraid that an intruder was inside, Galley quickly grabbed his gun, gave a weapon to Pramila's brother, and began searching for the unwelcome visitor. Little did either of the men know, Pramila and her cousin had quietly snuck into the house to play a prank on them. When Pramila jumped out from a closet to scare Galley, he was armed and ready to shoot. He pulled the trigger before even realizing that it was the teen playing a harmless joke. Pramila passed away thanks to her injuries, and Galley was charged with reckless endangerment and a few other counts, including a gun charge. Authorities acknowledged that Galley didn't actually mean to kill Pramila, but they went back and forth on whether or not the shooting constituted a homicide. Galley was never charged with killing Pramila and seems to have squared away his legal issues. Number 13. Toilet paper tragedy. One night in 2010, when 34-year-old Alabama firefighter James Luther McRae noticed a few teens lurking in his yard, he thought they were trying to break into the home. After realizing that they'd been spotted, the teens got into a car and drove away. McRae dialed 911 and reported the incident while chasing after the kids in his own truck. He tried getting close enough to the teens' car to get the license plate number, but accidentally lost control of his truck, overcorrected, and crashed into a nearby fence. The truck then rolled over, and McRae, who wasn't wearing his seatbelt, was ejected from the vehicle. He died from his injuries. Investigators traced the incident to a group of 3 teenage girls and a young man. The high schoolers worked with law enforcement and explained that they were toilet papering the homes of 2 of McRae's neighbors as part of their senior prank. They didn't mean for anyone to get hurt because of their actions. Escambia County Sheriff Grover Smith told AL.com that the area had a long-standing tradition of toilet papering and other pranks among high school seniors close to graduation. After McRae's death, he announced the implementation of a zero-tolerance policy toward these pranks in the future. Smith said that he wasn't trying to put youngsters in jail, but that things had to change now that a man needlessly lost his life by trying to protect his home and family. Number 12. Susan Tammy Hudson. A 52-year-old Tennessee woman named Susan Tammy Hudson thought it would be funny to convince her sister Helen that she killed her husband as an April Fool's prank back in 2013. She told Helen that she fatally shot the unfortunate victim and that she had to clean up the mess. Hudson suggested that she and her sister bury her husband's body in the nearby town of Blackwater, which straddles the Tennessee-Virginia border. But it was no laughing matter when police showed up at the woman's house after getting a report from a relative about the alleged murder. Hudson was quickly taken into custody, but she managed to avoid getting arrested after proving that her husband was actually alive and well, and that she had no real intentions to harm or kill him. After the misunderstanding was settled, Hudson told local news station WKPT-19 that she should be careful about the types of jokes she plays on gullible relatives in the future. But she praised the local police department for their quick response and cited their appearance as an impressive display of the agency's effectiveness. Thankfully, nobody was hurt as a result of the prank, which came just days after a young woman from Wagner County, Oklahoma, named Tori Wheeler, told her boyfriend that she was pregnant. It wasn't true, and Wheeler's partner, Derek Bauer, didn't think it was very funny. In fact, he was pretty upset about it, and Wheeler allegedly responded to the reaction by threatening the man with a knife. Bauer then dialed 911, at which point Wheeler flew into a rage and cut his throat. Luckily, he survived, and according to police, Wheeler admitted to the violent confrontation. While Bauer was given stitches for his wounds, Wheeler was charged with assault. Number 11. The prank that nearly started a war. Back in 1986, an Israeli intelligence analyst played an April Fool's prank by spreading a false report that an assassination attempt was made on Lebanese Shiite Muslim leader Nabi Berri. According to the bogus report, Berri had been seriously wounded. It was sent out to several government officials and a state-owned radio station, which broadcasted the report to a wider audience in both Israeli and English. The hoax was not only distasteful, it caused increased tensions in a region that was already plagued by poor relations between multiple countries. After realizing the report was fake, the Israeli military scrambled to take back the news and make sure people knew it wasn't true. It especially didn't help that Berri's supporters saw Israel as untrustworthy and shrouded in conspiracies. Thankfully, action was taken fast enough to stop the fake news from cycling even further, sparing tensions in the Middle East from flaring too out of control. The officer behind the prank was sentenced to just 35 days detention. Number 10. Adrian Broadway. In early 2014, a group of teenagers in Little Rock, Arkansas, decided to take revenge against a fellow high schooler who pulled a prank against them on Halloween a few months before. They went to the target's home and covered a vehicle that was parked in the driveway with toilet paper, eggs, and even mayonnaise. As the group left the property, a man came running out of the house with a gun and opened fire on the teens. One of the bullets struck a young girl named Adrian Broadway in the head. She was killed by her injuries, and one of her friends survived after getting hit in the arm. Authorities charged the shooter, 48-year-old Willie Noble, with first-degree murder, committing a terroristic act, and 5 counts of aggravated assault. Noble told police officers that he wasn't aiming at anyone in particular and that he didn't mean to actually shoot and hurt anyone. His intention was to simply scare the teens, and he claimed that he was pointing the gun up while he shot. Arkansas doesn't have a stand-your-ground law similar to those in Texas and Florida, which gives property owners a lot of wiggle room for being able to legally shoot trespassers. The state's law does give leeway to homeowners who defend the perimeter of their home in certain cases, leaving many afraid that Noble might be able to get out of the murder charge. But that never actually happened. A jury found Noble guilty, and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison with eligibility for parole after serving 21 years. He'll become officially eligible for parole in October 2036. Number 9. Nicholas Bell. When their family homes were too overcrowded during Thanksgiving in 2010, buddies Jeffrey Charbonneau and Nicholas Bell decided to stay at a friend's house in Manchester, Vermont. Something went terribly wrong, though, resulting in a 911 call from Bell claiming that he accidentally shot Charbonneau in the chest with what he thought was a simple BB gun. According to several reports, Bell planned to prank Charbonneau by shooting the gun to wake him up. But the weapon wasn't just a BB gun. It was a loaded .22 caliber rifle, and a bullet struck Charbonneau fatally in the chest. He was just 24 years old at the time of his death. Someone familiar with the incident disputed claims about the tragedy being a prank gone wrong, but confirmed that Bell mistook the rifle for a BB gun and was examining the weapon when it accidentally went off. Either way, it was agreed upon by law enforcement that the young man didn't mean to kill Charbonneau, and that Bell's lack of experience with guns likely contributed to the shooting. But Bell still had to answer for his actions, so the 23-year-old was charged with manslaughter, assault with a weapon, and reckless endangerment. He pleaded no contest to every count. Bell was sentenced to serve 1 year in prison and also received a 7-year suspended sentence, which meant he would serve 1 year and remain free for the rest of his sentence as long as he followed the rules set by the court. He cried and apologized profusely at the sentencing hearing, but the victim's family wasn't ready to forgive yet. They urged the judge to impose the maximum prison sentence and were disappointed by what seemed like a slap on the wrist to Bell for taking a human life. The judge acknowledged that the family's frustrations were all valid, but noted that the law punishes accidental deaths differently than those that are caused on purpose. And in the absence of intent, the conviction and sentence were well in line with what the law called for. The punishment was also based on Bell being unlikely to reoffend and his lack of a need for rehabilitation. Number 8. Honoring the Boston Strangler. Albert DeSalvo, or the Boston Strangler, brutally killed at least 13 women in and around Boston between the years 1962 and 1964. He was also a serial attacker who was imprisoned for life in 1967 after assaulting multiple women. While in prison, DeSalvo confessed to the Boston Strangler murders, but he was never convicted for any of the crimes. His guilt remains a large topic of speculation and debate even to this day, although DNA evidence has linked him to at least one of the deaths. Many who knew DeSalvo personally didn't think he would ever be capable of murder, even though he wasn't exactly the sweet and innocent type. Either way, he went down in history as the Boston Strangler. In 1973, DeSalvo was stabbed and killed in prison at the age of 42. Back in 1971, Texas State Representative Tom Moore, Jr. introduced a proposition to commend Albert DeSalvo as an upstanding citizen who unselfishly served his country, his state, and his community. Moore sponsored the proposal mainly as an April Fool's Day prank because he knew his colleagues often passed bills and resolutions without actually reading them thoroughly. The text described DeSalvo as a compassionate gentleman who enabled the weak and the lonely throughout the nation to achieve and maintain a new degree of concern for their future. Specifically, the resolution commended the killer for his innovative population control and applied psychology techniques. Just as Moore expected, the resolution to honor DeSalvo passed without issue. He withdrew it before it could be put through, and he explained that he pulled the prank to make a point about how state lawmakers often passed legislation without reading it or properly researching topics. The stunt may have not looked that great to the public, but it wasn't surprising to many who are familiar with how the process of passing law works. As Snopes founder David Mickelson said, "It's usually expected that lawmakers will rubber stamp a proposed resolution honoring a person as a gesture of goodwill to their colleague who introduced it." But Moore made a point by highlighting the need for legislators to be better when it comes to doing due diligence. Number 7. Danny Crawford. One night back in 2006, a teenager named Danny Crawford and two of his friends passed the time by throwing eggs at passing vehicles in Columbus, Ohio. But Michael Gross and his son Michael Jr. didn't think it was very funny when eggs splattered against the outside of their Jeep Cherokee. Gross got out of the car and chased away the teens, and at some point he even began firing. Crawford died at the scene from a single gunshot. Police impounded the Jeep shortly after the crime, but it wasn't until months later that they discovered the gun that was used in the shooting under the vehicle's hood. An arrest finally came about 4 years after Crawford's death in 2010, when Gross was officially charged with murder and tampering with evidence. He took a plea deal at the 11th hour to avoid a trial and admitted to everything. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, which Crawford's family didn't think was long enough. They were also very upset that the case didn't go to trial like they'd hoped, and that the plea deal was sprung on them. Danny Crawford's mother, Nancy, told local news station WBNS that the desire for Gross to get the maximum sentence wasn't rooted in hate. In fact, she said they'd forgiven Gross for taking Danny's life, and that she hoped her family would get to a place of healing where they could think about Danny without having to think about the graphic circumstances surrounding his death. Number 6. Richard Nixon radio prank. On April Fool's Day 1992, National Public Radio announced during its Talk of the Nation program that Richard Nixon had plans to run for president. Richard Nixon resigned in 1974 to avoid getting impeached over the infamous Watergate scandal. In short, the scandal involved numerous illegal and unethical activities committed by members of the Nixon administration, including bugging the offices of several political opponents and harassing activists. These activities were publicized after after 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic Party's national headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. It opened up a floodgate in terms of exposing the shady undertakings that had been carried out under Nixon's watch, and his efforts to downplay the scandal failed completely. Nobody ever imagined that Nixon would try to run for president again, and he didn't, but many certainly thought he was planning on it when they heard the fake April Fool's broadcast. During the announcement, the show played a clip of what sounded like Nixon saying, "I never did anything wrong and I won't do it again." It was then followed by a seemingly serious analysis of Nixon's decision to run for president and how it may potentially affect the race. Listeners were shocked, to say the least. Calls flooded into NPR from people eager to express their disapproval. By the time host John Hockenberry announced during the second half of the show that the announcement was a prank and that an impersonator was behind Nixon's voice, thousands of people had already fallen for it. They were most likely relieved to find out that it was a prank and that they could call off any plans to protest. Number 5. Randy Lee Tenley. In a bizarre bid to stir reports of Bigfoot sightings, 44-year-old Randy Lee Tenley put on a costume of the mythical creature one night back in 2012 and creepily walked along Highway 93 in Kalispell, Montana. Authorities later said that alcohol may have been a factor in Tenley's choice of activities. The prank went horribly wrong, though, when Tenley was hit by a car and was left helplessly lying in the road, where he was eventually hit by another vehicle. He died from his injuries, and the 2 teenage drivers who crashed into him were left traumatized. Montana State Trooper Jim Schneider told the Daily Interlake that he had never seen a case like this happen before. In his words, "You can't make it up." He went on to explain that the type of costume Tenley was wearing, known as a ghillie suit, is made to resemble thick foliage. It's often used to camouflage military snipers and would have made it pretty difficult for drivers to see him until they had little to no time to avoid him. Number 4. Peter Wade. In July 1982, while drinking alcohol and smoking pot along some railroad tracks in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, a group of teenagers decided it would be fun to derail a train. After waiting for an oncoming passenger train to pass, Peter Benton and Peter Wade threw the nearby switch. The train came hurtling along at 60 miles per hour and quickly flew off the rails. It crashed into a pasta factory nearby, turning the locomotive and 5 passenger cars into a mangled mess of metal. At the time, there were only 5 passengers and 2 members of the crew on the train. They all luckily survived with minor injuries, but the engineer, 50-year-old Jack Duffy, was crushed to death. The teens left the scene and learned about Duffy's death not long after. 5 suspects were arrested in connection to the horrific prank, and Wade and Benton were among the 3 who faced some of the most serious charges. Wade pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was ordered to serve up to 5 years behind bars. Benton and a 3rd defendant, Randy Lee Gelb, were given the same sentence. Wade was released at the age of 20 after serving about 22 months. He went on to make $1 million a year as a successful stock analyst on Wall Street. On the outside, he had turned his life around, but the guilt he felt over his crime slowly ate away at him, and in the early 2000s he decided to shift gears and pursue a filmmaking career. His debut film, Tracks, tells his story as a wayward teen who set his path straight after a tragedy. When Jack Duffy's surviving loved ones learned about the movie, they were understandably upset. To them, it seemed like Wade was capitalizing on their loved one's death, and they felt the storyline sent the wrong message. That a teenager can do something horrific, resulting in the loss of a human life, and still go on to be wildly successful. During interviews about the movie, Wade referred to the derailment as the accident, causing many to wonder if he had really come to terms with his role in the destructively deliberate act. He also hesitated to describe the act as premeditated, instead saying that it was a split-second decision that he made at the urging of another member of the group. Number 3. The Left-Handed Whopper. One of the most famous April Fool's Day pranks came in 1998 when Burger King published a full-page ad in USA Today promoting a left-handed Whopper. It claimed to have the same ingredients and condiments as the original Whopper, but had all condiments rotated 180 degrees to stop lettuce and other toppings from spilling out of the burger. The ad had a quote from Burger King's Senior Vice President for Marketing, Jim Watkins, describing the sandwich as the ultimate have it your way for our left-handed customers. It also said that the left-handed Whopper would only be available in the United States, but that the company eventually planned to expand expand its availability to restaurants in other countries with large left-handed populations. Hopefully, you understand the humor behind this campaign without us having to explain that the Whopper's condiments are already distributed evenly throughout the burger, and that left-handed diners don't really suffer from a higher tendency for the contents to spill. But many of America's 32 million lefties apparently didn't understand it was a joke, and the restaurant was flooded with thousands of orders for the left-handed Whopper. Other customers requested their own right-handed version of the sandwich. The day after the ad went live, the company revealed that the non-existent burger was an unexpected hit. Burger King clarified that the campaign was simply an April Fool's Day prank and that the Whopper is indeed an ambidextrous sandwich. Number 2. Seth Stonerock and Derek Greenlee. It's unclear whether Seth Stonerock and Derek Greenlee knew how dangerous it was to hide a stop sign by wrapping it up in plastic, but that's what they decided to do at an intersection in Circleville, Ohio back in 2011, making the sign extremely difficult to see. Unable to spot the sign, an elderly woman drove straight through the intersection without slowing down or stopping, and was hit by another vehicle. 85-year-old Mary Spangler and her 81-year-old sister, Norma Jean Shea, both died due to their injuries. Investigators soon discovered that Stonerock and Greenlee had bragged on Facebook about the thoughtless prank. Surveillance footage captured the young men buying cellophane at a local Walmart. Neither of the young men had passed criminal records, and they had both recently graduated from high school. Any future plans they may have had were now interrupted with involuntary manslaughter charges. The case against Greenlee was soon dropped after prosecutors decided there wasn't enough evidence against him to move forward. Stonerock took a plea deal and admitted to 2 counts of reckless homicide in exchange for getting the manslaughter charge dropped, and 1 count of tampering with a traffic control device. Thanks to his history of being an outstanding community member before the prank, he was released from prison after serving just 8 months of a 4-year sentence. We have another great video lined up right after number 1. If you need more of a daily world list dosage, then be sure to stay tuned if you haven't seen that one yet. Number 1. Jaffa Alien Invasion. On April Fool's Day 2010, the Jordanian newspaper Al-Had published a front-page news article claiming that UFOs landed in the desert near the town of Jaffa. The strange aircraft's pilots were described as 3-meter creatures, and the piece mentioned that the unidentified vehicles caused a massive communications blackout in the area. According to the article, the flying saucers lit up the night sky as they descended toward the Earth. Naturally, Jaffa's residents broke into a panic. Many people ran into the street, while other scared civilians kept their children locked up at home to protect them from the otherworldly visitors. Mayor Mohammed Milihan prepared an evacuation order for the town's 13,000 residents, and he even notified the authorities of his plans. After learning that the whole thing was just a hoax, Milihan was unamused. He admonished the newspaper for terrifying the people of Jaffa and said he was considering suing the publication for its lies. The newspaper apologized for the stunt, but didn't explain why it specifically targeted Jaffa with the prank. According to the BBC, the region is notorious for having military bases which were once used for joint training exercises by the United States Armed Forces and the Jordanian Army. The bases were also once occupied by Al-Qaeda militants. After realizing the extent of the panic that was caused, Al-Had's managing editor Musa Barhume said that the news report was blown out of proportion. He also explained that the purpose of the prank was to amuse, not scare people. It may seem shocking that even Jaffa's mayor fell for the elaborate hoax, especially if you live in a country where April Fool's Day pranks are more popular, but the tradition isn't common in Jordan, which helps explain why the UFO prank spread like wildfire. The prank was reminiscent of the panic that erupted in the United States during a 1938 radio broadcast known as War of the Worlds. Aired during Halloween over the CBS radio network and narrated by Orson Welles, the series went down in history for causing widespread panic about a possible alien invasion. The series didn't have a large following, and to this day the scale of the hysteria is heavily disputed. While most versions of the story talk about complete mayhem, evidence suggests that the public's reaction was not quite so dramatic. But the fictional news did generate an overwhelming influx of phone calls, and the studio was flooded by both police officers and reporters. The reaction in Jaffa was arguably much more extreme, especially considering how it almost triggered an evacuation. Luckily, the needless squandering of resources was avoided.
10. Danielle Stafford. In April 2023, a 29-year-old engineer from Horgate, Cottingham, named Danielle Stafford was sentenced to 7.5 years in jail for running a cocaine operation and being involved in the supply of both heroin and cannabis. She had lived a life full of luxury, indulging in expensive goods like Louis Vuitton handbags and watches. She even bought a second home with her drug money. During her trial at Hull Crown Court, it was revealed that she had avoided using her actual job salary and instead relied significantly on the cash income generated from her illegal activities. Stafford tried to lie to the court by claiming that she was the victim of a Liverpool drug dealer after she was caught speeding by police officers. But substantial evidence showed her deep involvement in drug dealing. During her arrest, the police found £26,917 in cash hidden around her house, along with drugs valued at approximately £33,600. Despite her attempts to downplay the origin of the expensive items on her property, the court didn't believe her claims that they were fake or just gifts from family members. Judge Mark Berry, who presided over the case, emphasized that Stafford had considerable talent and potential as a promising engineer, but chose to participate in criminal activities instead. During the trial, it was revealed that Stafford denied 9 charges at first, but eventually changed her pleas to guilty on 4 counts to try and get a more lenient sentence. The evidence presented against her was strong, leaving little doubt about her involvement in the drug-dealing ring. The police initially spotted Stafford driving a silver Audi at high speeds, leading up to her arrest. Subsequent searches of her vehicle and home revealed drugs, drug-related messages on her cell phone, and large amounts of cash hidden throughout her property. Stafford's defense argued that her involvement in Class A drug dealing came later and was influenced by an unnamed person from Liverpool. But the court found evidence of her being a cannabis dealer for a substantial period of time before she progressed to dealing cocaine. Although she claimed innocence, the court deemed Stafford responsible for her actions and the financial reward she gained from the drug ring. The judge added that her lavish lifestyle and the items discovered at her home indicated her ability to earn substantial income from the illegal business. On top of her prison sentence, Stafford's assets, including her second home and luxury goods, were likely to be confiscated since the court saw them as proceeds of her drug dealing. Throughout the trial, Stafford remained impassive, but she expressed words of thanks to her supporters in the public gallery as she was led to her cell. Her defense attorney, Salima Mahmood, argued that Stafford showed remorse and engaged in voluntary work while seeking legitimate employment opportunities. Prosecutor Nadeem Bashir presented evidence claiming the opposite, showing Stafford's involvement in dealing with both cannabis and Class A drugs. The court acknowledged that she'd managed to avoid the attention of police officers for an extended period, leading to substantial financial gains from her illegal interests. The case demonstrated the serious consequences associated with drug dealing and the impact it can have on individuals and society as a whole. Stafford's promising career as an engineer was derailed thanks to her involvement in criminal activities, resulting in her imprisonment and the loss of her wealth. 9. Anna Sorokin. In 2017, a woman who claimed to be an heiress was caught faking her wealth when she was arrested for not paying her bill at a restaurant in New York City. Anna Sorokin, a Russian immigrant from a middle-class family, arrived in New York City with big dreams and a plan in mind. She wanted to become a prominent figure in Manhattan's high-class society. So, to achieve this, she created a fictitious identity as a wealthy German heiress named Anna Delvey. She wore designer clothes from luxury brands like Gucci and Yves Saint Laurent and moved from one upscale hotel to another, living a lavish lifestyle fueled by expensive meals and private flights. Sorokin managed to convince multiple people that she was the heiress she claimed to be. She portrayed herself as a well-off woman with a taste for the finer things in life. Her appearance and confidence made her lies convincing to many, but little did her friends know it was all part of an elaborate scam. To maintain her false identity, Sorokin resorted to fraudulent tactics, swindling over $275,000 from victims, including her own friends and financial institutions. She manipulated those around her, convincing them of her vast wealth overseas and need for monetary assistance. Using fake financial statements and forged documents, she obtained credit lines, financial aid, and funds from both banks and hedge funds, promising to eventually repay them through wire transfers from her alleged European account. But no money was ever transferred, and Sorokin kept all of the funds for herself. According to the Washington Post, one of her many ambitious projects was the creation of a members-only arts club called ADF, or the Anna Delvey Foundation. She even enlisted the help of a young up-and-coming architect, Gabriel Andres Calatrava, the son of renowned architect Santiago Calatrava, to design the club for her. With false claims of a trust fund worth over 60 million euros, Sorokin convinced him of her financial standing. But the truth was that her father, reportedly a former truck driver from Russia, was running a modest heating and cooling business in Germany and had been supporting her for years. Despite her elaborate scheme, Sorokin's grand plans ultimately crumbled into pieces. Her fraudulent activities caught up with her when her debts started to pile up and she was unable to pay her bills. She was even locked out of her room at 11 Howard Hotel and was forced to leave the W Hotel after failing to give them a credit card. Then, in a desperate bid to avoid paying a restaurant bill less than $200 at La Parca Meridian back in 2017, she falsely claimed that her aunt from Germany would cover the expenses for her. But instead of her fictitious aunt, the police showed up and arrested her for not paying. After a month-long trial, Sorokin was finally convicted on most of the charges, including second-degree grand larceny, attempted grand larceny, and theft of services. The jury acquitted her of some of the more serious charges though, like trying to secure a $22 million loan and stealing $60,000 from a friend for a short trip to Morocco. Then, in 2019, a judge sentenced Sorokin to 4 to 12 years behind bars. Her time started in 2017 when she was initially arrested, so by 2022 she'd already served about 4 years in prison and was released under strict conditions. As long as she wears her ankle monitor and stays off social media completely, she'll no longer be viewed as a threat. But despite her conviction, Sorokin's story has captivated public interest, and a series based on her life was even produced by Netflix called Inventing Anna. Many applauded her fraud as a sort of Robin Hood-like move, since she mainly seemed to scam money out of the rich. 8. Vodka and Crime. In late 2022, the couple behind a vodka firm in Lanarkshire, Scotland, Johnny Morrissey and his wife Nicola, were arrested in Spain for money laundering. Nicola was the director of Nero Drinks Company Ltd. The arrest came as Spanish authorities claimed to have cracked down on an international money laundering operation that involved the Kinahan crime gang. The Kinahan gang, which was previously compared to the Italian mafia and terrorist groups, has been under recent scrutiny by law enforcement. And Johnny Morrissey was identified earlier this year as having close ties to the clan, with suspicions of him being involved in laundering about £173 million the previous year. Recently, Spanish authorities released video evidence of the couple's arrest at their villa in the Marbella area as their home was searched. The Guardia de Civil, Spain's oldest law enforcement agency, said that Johnny Morrissey had allegedly collected large amounts of cash from criminal organizations operating throughout Spain. He then used the Hawala system to transfer it to other criminal groups overseas. The investigation uncovered evidence of transfers totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. The Nero Drinks Company is suspected of being a front for laundering illegal funds. The members of the organization in Spain allegedly promoted a luxury vodka brand in extravagant Costa del Sol areas to create the illusion of legitimacy. But tax authorities revealed that the company couldn't have actually supported the lifestyle of those involved based on the profits it reported. Another facet of the operation included creating a company in the UK, which relied on a Gibraltar-based firm to mask the true identities of directors engaged in money laundering through the Hawala system. Hawala is an ancient informal transfer system that requires no physical movement of cash and operates entirely anonymously. so investigators believe that the laundered money is physically still in Spain. In addition to the Morrisseys, a third suspect was taken into custody in Spain, and a former expat Irish national was arrested in the UK. Facilities in Rochdale and Glasgow were also searched during the operation. Nicola Morrissey, though, was reportedly released on bail after a court hearing. The investigation involved close cooperation between Spanish police, the DEA from the US, Britain's National Crime Agency, and the Gardaí, or Irish police. And it was sparked after £430,000 in cash and 200 kilograms of cocaine were seized from multiple cars that had been adapted to hide money and drug shipments. Nero Vodka set off on a 5-year sponsorship deal with Hamilton Accies back in 2019. The couple previously expressed support for responsible drinking. They even backed the Drink Aware campaign in the past, an independent charity that aims to reduce alcohol-related harm by helping people who struggle with addiction make better choices. Considering their involvement with crime, this only makes the couple look worse. 7. Daniela Rendon. In February 2023, 31-year-old Miami real estate broker Daniela Rendon faced serious federal fraud charges for allegedly misusing COVID-19 relief funds to support an extravagant lifestyle. Rendon bought private jets, luxury yachts, high-end cars, and expensive clothing. She also openly showcased her wealth on social media platforms, where she had over 33,000 collective followers. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida revealed that Rendon was given $381,000 through the Small Business Administration and Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, which was intended to help struggling businesses during the pandemic. But she's instead accused of using the funds to indulge herself, her friends, and her family. Among the luxuries she allowed herself, she allegedly leased a 2021 Bentley Bentayga, which came with a hefty price tag of $181,000. She even had the audacity to feature it on her Instagram. Additionally, Rendon rented out a luxury apartment in Biscayne Bay, underwent several cosmetic procedures, and even had a pair of designer shoes fixed using the misappropriated funds. Rendon was hit with a boatload of charges, including 7 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of aggravated identity theft, and 2 counts of money laundering. If she's convicted, she'll be facing about 20 years in prison. Prosecutors considered her a flight risk and were worried that she might try to evade justice by returning to her home country of Colombia. So, as a result, her bond was set at a whopping $150,000. To get the funds meant for struggling businesses, Rendon allegedly falsified her own business's data to secure the PPP funds. She submitted incorrect information on revenue, payroll, costs, tax details, and even her employee count to lenders in both New Jersey and Idaho, receiving the loans directly into her corporate bank account. The indictment states that Rendon worked with a payroll processor in New Jersey to process the loans and issue checks to family and friends in her close inner circle. As an apparent real estate agent specializing in ultra-luxury properties, as described on her LinkedIn profile, Rendon applied for $371,000 in business loans through the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program and $10,000 through the Economic Injury Disaster Relief Program. 6. Michael Vorole and Christopher Lang. In July 2023, a man from Hays, Kansas, and his accomplice in California were arrested for fraud after an FBI search of one of their homes on June 26th. The arrest came after FBI agents apprehended 2 individuals involved in a telemarketing scheme. The scam specifically targeted elderly people. The accused, 44-year-old Michael Vorole from West Los Angeles and 42-year-old Christopher Lang in Hays, were charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Police Chief Don Scheibler mentioned that Hays police officers supported the FBI during the search of Lang's home. The pair allegedly pretended to represent several different companies offering advertising and services to current or former timeshare owners, convincing victims to pay fees in exchange for timeshare-related services that were never actually delivered. After initial payments were sent by the victims, Vorole and Lang continued contacting them through various methods attempting to extract more money. As a result of this fraudulent scheme, at least 370 elderly individuals lost a combined total of over $4.5 million. These victims relied heavily on their Social Security income, investment, retirement accounts, and savings to pay the fake companies. Despite the victims making recurring payments over several years, they never received the timeshare-related services or proceeds they were promised. Evidence gathered during the investigation suggested that the suspects used the funds from their scheme to pay for personal expenses and luxury items. The FBI's Los Angeles field office is now leading the investigation with help from the FBI's Kansas City field office. The case is being prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office in Los Angeles. Vorole has been detained since his initial court appearance, while Lang's detention hearing has been scheduled for later in the year. So, since neither of them has received a sentence, we'll have to wait and see what punishments they'll get. What do you think can be done to stop online scams from targeting elderly people? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. 5. Kyla Massa. On February 13, 2020, federal investigators put an end to a brazen Instagram scam that targeted victims for years. The arrest was made in connection with a conspiracy to commit bank and wire fraud. The main culprit was 22-year-old Kyla Massa, an influencer on Instagram and YouTube. The scheme involved recruiting victims through Instagram and convincing them to hand over their banking information after emptying their accounts. These stolen bank cards were then used to deposit substantial amounts of stolen money. The investigation revealed that the scam had generated well over $1.5 million. The fraudulent activity started out as early as July 2018, when the US Postal Service found 53 blank money orders stolen from an office in Berlin, New Jersey. Postal inspectors traced a few of the money orders to a resident in Barrington, New Jersey, who's only referred to as JK in official court documents. The victim responded to a posting by an Instagram user named K Goldie, who promised up to $5,000 in return for using the bank account, but the promised money never materialized. Massa allegedly promoted her scheme through countless Instagram stories, flaunting huge stacks of money, account balances, and money orders. The videos also featured people holding debit cards and large amounts of cash, creating an aura of wealth and success. To alleviate fears of losing money, Massa encouraged victims to empty their bank accounts before handing over their cards and PIN numbers. Once the victims' funds were emptied, Massa and her associates made purchases and deposits using counterfeit checks and money orders. The victims were then left with negative balances, and the scammers attempted to launder the ill-gotten gains by getting legitimate money orders. Two other victims of the scam, named CF and MD in court documents, spoke about similar experiences, where they handed over their debit cards and PIN numbers to Massa in the hopes of making money. But once the deposits were identified as fraudulent, the victims' accounts were overdrawn and closed completely. The investigation eventually led to the arrest of Massa and 10 other individuals, including her sister, boyfriend, and several associates involved in the scheme. Apparently, the group deposited over 1,600 fraudulent or counterfeit checks and 650 counterfeit or stolen money orders between May 2018 and February 2020, with the intended loss estimated totaling at least $1,015,663. It's unclear if any of them have been sentenced yet, suggesting that the case may still be under investigation. 4. Marlon and LaShonda Moore. In Texas, Marlon Moore, or DJ ASAP, and his wife LaShonda lured black investors with promises of building generational wealth and getting returns as high as 800% through an investment program called Blessings in No Time, or BINT. According to the Washington Post, participants were asked to pay an upfront fee of either $1,400 or $1,425, with the potential to receive up to $11,200 or $11,400 back, a whopping 8 times their original investment. But it was actually a pyramid scheme that scammed tens of millions of dollars from thousands of people, many of whom happened to be African Americans that were targeted through affinity fraud. Affinity fraud typically involves exploiting shared characteristics like race or religion to gain trust and deceive victims. The Moors, who are black themselves, preyed on the shared race and religious beliefs of their investors, using religious overtones and prayers to gain trust. Texas authorities officially filed a lawsuit against the couple back in 2021, and the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, along with the state of Arkansas, accused them of running a pyramid scheme. Thankfully, the Moors didn't get away with their scam. On July 26, 2023, they were handed a $10.8 million judgment in Texas, with a settlement that will give refunds to 8,000 victims across the country. The settlement also permanently bans Marlon and LaShonda Moore from engaging in any multi-level marketing businesses in the future. And although victims may not ever fully recover their losses, the Moors were ordered to pay no less than $450,000, but up to $2.5 million back to them, in addition to the $10.8 million judgment, for a Texas-administered fund to help those that were affected by the dastardly scheme. This case serves as a warning and will make it easier to identify similar scams in the future. The history of economic depravity faced by African Americans creates unique vulnerability to such tricks. The promise of building wealth and creating opportunities for future generations makes affinity schemes appealing to the average person, but they're nothing more than manipulative cash grabs. The Moors and their pyramid scheme highlights the need for vigilance and education in identifying and avoiding fraud and other deceptive investment programs going forward. By raising awareness and stopping similar scams, we can protect vulnerable communities from falling victim to these horrible schemes. 3. Robin Sarpong. On September 4, 2019, a 35-year-old man from New Jersey named Robin Sarpong was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Sarpong defrauded over 30 victims by luring them in through internet dating sites, resulting in a loss of over $2 million. To trick these people, Sarpong made several fake online dating profiles, predominantly portraying a US military man stationed overseas and seeking a romantic connection. But these profiles were entirely fake, or sometimes based on stolen identities, according to federal prosecutors in Camden, New Jersey. FBI Special Agent in Charge Gregory Airy warned that in our current digital age, it's crucial to approach interactions with strangers online with skepticism. He added that fraudsters are continuously finding ways to exploit people for financial gain with little effort. Starting back in January 2016, Sarpong successfully managed to deceive his victims into sending him money through wire transfers, personal/cashier's checks, and popular money transfer services like Western Union. He claimed that the funds were needed to ship gold bars to the United States, while he and his accomplices in Ghana pocketed the money. To further deceive his victims, Sarpong posted photos on social media showcasing himself with large amounts of cash, luxury vehicles, and expensive jewelry. Justice was served, though, in 2022 when a federal judge handed him 14 years in prison for his role in the dating scam. Sarpong was also given 3 years of supervised release on top of the prison term, and he was ordered to pay $3 million in restitution to his 36 victims. 2. Kieran Hamilton. In the city of Manchester, 21-year-old Kieran Hamilton, or Kez, experienced something terrifying that shed light on a concerning crime trend back in May 2018. As a successful cryptocurrency trader, Kez saw his fortunes rise, and he didn't hesitate to share his success on social media. But little did he know that displaying his wealth would make him a target for criminals. According to Vice, late one night while Kez was asleep in his home, he was woken up by some strange noises. Thinking it was simply one of his French bulldogs causing a ruckus, he decided to investigate while dressed in only his boxers. But as he went down the stairs, Kez found himself in a nightmare he couldn't have ever imagined. He was confronted by a chilling sight: 2 masked men holding machetes. The men yelled their demands through the room. Their voices were clear. They wanted money, drugs, and expensive watches. The attackers seemed convinced that Kez was a wealthy drug dealer thanks to rumors circulating about in the local community. Being from a lower working-class background, he faced skepticism about his quick success as a cryptocurrency trader. Jealousy and speculation about the source of his money led to whispers that he must have been involved in illegal activities. His flashy online presence with luxurious cars, shopping sprees, trips, and Rolex watches only added fuel to the gossip fire. The two intruders were relentless, ordering Kez to empty his safe, search under his mattress, and hand over any cash he possessed. But Kez maintained his innocence, insisting that he wasn't involved in drug dealing and had no hidden stashes. Sadly, this only seemed to irritate the attackers. In addition to Kez's story, a growing number of reports have linked burglaries to social media posts. According to a report made in 2018, 1 in every 12 Brits reported burglaries after sharing personal information to platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The troubling reality is that burglars also use social media, just like everyone else. Only criminals use it to identify and track potential targets. In some cases, location tagging is enabled, offering thieves a direct line to victims' whereabouts. The repercussions of Insta-bragging have become so significant that insurers are contemplating not paying out in certain theft cases. A standard contents insurance contract typically includes a reasonable care clause, which might be deemed void if individuals recklessly expose their wealth online. Kez's case shares striking similarities with other public figures and influencers who've been victims of thefts after online exposure. For instance, the Saudi influencer Hitham was mugged while in London, and even YouTube star PewDiePie had his home robbed after unintentionally revealing his address in a video. It's important to recognize that social media offers a curated glimpse into individuals' lives, showcasing the best and most luxurious aspects. Unfortunately, this selective sharing can inadvertently attract unwanted attention. Kez learned this the hard way, as his sarcastic response to attackers only aggravated the situation further, resulting in violence and injury. The perpetrators managed to get away with Kez's laptop, phone, and even his dog Rambo. Understandably, Kez had a difficult time after the robbery, feeling violated and unsafe in his own home. Luckily though, at least one of the robbers was brought to justice. 27-year-old Corey Frigga of Blackburn Lancs was arrested after publicly admitting to the crime. He also confessed to another unrelated offense, possessing drugs with intent to supply. As a result, he was sentenced to 13 years behind bars. Today, Kez has shifted his focus away from cryptocurrency trading, instead preferring to invest in property. While he still maintains a small online presence, he's installed strict security measures to protect his personal information and safety. He acknowledges that making posts online is part of his job, since it showcases his success and motivates others to work hard. Kez now emphasizes the importance of finding a balance between sharing and safeguarding himself. His experience serves as a cautionary tale for individuals who want to showcase their luxurious lifestyles on social media. While sharing achievements and success can be inspiring, it's also critical to exercise caution and be aware of potential risks. Social media can be a double-edged sword, amplifying both positive and negative aspects of our lives. So, practicing vigilance and understanding the implications of our online personas is crucial to maintaining personal security. 1. Fernando Perez Algaba. On July 23, 2023, the dismembered body of Fernando Perez Algaba, a 41-year-old self-proclaimed millionaire crypto influencer, was discovered stuffed inside a suitcase in Argentina. Suspiciously, the grim find came just a few weeks after Algaba posted disturbing messages to his social media, describing his fears of being targeted by evil people that wanted to harm him. The discovery happened in Ingeniero Bunch, Buenos Aires, where 2 children were playing football when they stumbled upon the abandoned red suitcase holding Algaba's body parts. His body had 2 gunshot wounds, and the remains were found over the course of multiple days. They found Algarba's legs and forearm inside the suitcase, followed by an arm in a nearby stream. Then finally the torso and head were located, stuffed inside a discarded backpack. The clean and precise amputation of the body parts indicated that a professional must have been involved in the mutilation. The remains were accurately identified by a 4-letter tattoo on a hand, and fingerprint analysis proved further confirmation that they belonged to Algarba. According to the autopsy, Algarba was killed by 2 shots to his back. It's reported that it racked up significant debt, and 1 suspect has been arrested in connection to the murder. The suspect's involvement came to light after investigators found the murder weapon inside a suitcase from their home. Leading up to his death, Algarba dealt with mounting threats and pressures from creditors, demanding the repayment of his debts, with one individual even threatening to hurt him physically. He'd allegedly accrued substantial financial losses after investing in several cryptocurrencies, which led to irrecoverable debts. Despite his financial struggles, Algarba projected a luxurious lifestyle on his social media pages, boasting about 918,000 followers on Instagram. He flaunted his expensive possessions, including jet skis, high-end cars, and exclusive party experiences. But his posts took a dark turn before his death, expressing concerns about the threatening intentions of certain individuals. Algarba had a rags-to-riches story, initially selling sandwiches and delivering pizzas before going into vehicle repair and resale. But eventually, he found success through investments in cryptocurrencies and the stock market, amassing a considerable fortune. He even owned a warehouse full of high-end vehicles by the age of 24. He'd previously lived in Miami in Spain before returning home to Argentina, where his life came to a tragic end. The murder investigation is ongoing as authorities dive deeper into the circumstances surrounding his death and the potential motives behind the despicable crime. So, for now, it's not clear who killed Algarba.
Thanks for watching. What's the biggest April Fool's prank you've ever pulled? Let us know in the comments down below.